We will now convene that special meeting. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Avalos?
Aye. Here.
Avalos present. President Breed?
Here.
Breed present. Supervisor Campos? Campos present. Supervisor Cohen?
Yeah.
Cohen present. Supervisor Farrell?
Present.
Farrell present. Supervisor Kim?
Here.
Kim present. Supervisor Marr? Marr present. Supervisor Peskin?
Present.
Peskin present. Supervisor Tang?
Physically present.
Tang present. Supervisor Wiener?
Present.
Wiener present. Supervisor Yee?
Present.
Yee present. Madam President, all members are present.
Okay. Called from committee. Madam Clerk, please call items number 1 and 2.
The Board of Supervisors has agreed to sit as a committee of the whole for an item that has been called from committee pursuant to Board Rule 3.37 and a motion that has been approved on July 15th. For items 1, which is a public hearing to consider a resolution affirming that the Board of Supervisors will not approve policies or submit ballot measures that underfund or otherwise undermine the ability of the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing to successfully implement a housing first and public health approach to addressing homelessness scheduled pursuant to motion M16091 approved by the board on the 15th, which is the subject of the resolution contained in item 2.
Okay. Seeing no members on the roster, I will open this item up to public comment for items number 1 and 2. Are there any members of the public who'd like to provide public comment for these 2 items? Seeing none, public... Come on, John. Come on. No? Okay. Seeing none, public comment is closed. Supervisor Peskin.
I'd like to make a motion to table item number 2.
Okay, Supervisor Peskin has made a motion to table item number 2, seconded by Supervisor Kim. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, item number 2 is tabled.
That was the pledge, yeah.
Okay, that was weird. Madam Clerk, can you please call items 3 and 4?
The board has agreed to sit as a committee of the whole for pursuant to a motion number M16-091 approved on July 15th, 2016 for an item that has been called from committee for a public hearing to consider a charter amendment 3rd draft to amend the charter of the city and County of San Francisco to create the Housing and Development Commission to oversee the Department of Economic and Workforce Development and the Department of Housing and Community Development, to require the Commission to review and make recommendations regarding proposed development agreements and conveyance of certain surplus city property before the Board considers such proposals, and to require the Commission to hold hearings and make recommendations regarding proposals to adopt or change inclusionary housing requirements for housing developments, and to require the Commission to adopt rules regarding the competitive selection process and expenditures of affordable housing funds for the development of affordable housing on city-owned property under the jurisdiction of the Department of Housing and Community Development, and to provide that ordinances regarding inclusionary housing requirements and rules regarding competitive selection for affordable housing adopted and set forth may supersede ordinances and rules adopted by the board or the voters prior to March 1st, 2017 at an election to be held on November 8th, 2016, scheduled pursuant to the motion approved on July 15th, which is these item number 4 is the charter amendment, Madam President, aforementioned.
Thank you. With that, Supervisor Peskin, no comment? Okay, we'll open this item up to Supervisor Tang.
Sorry, I have a question. Are we also able to, or have we called item 83 to discuss with this in conjunction?
It's on the floor, Madam President,
Okay.
before the body.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to open this hearing up to public comment. If there are any members of the public who'd like to provide public comment at this time, please come forward. First speaker.
Thank you, Supervisors. My name is Fernando Martí with the Council of Community Housing Organizations. As you all know, affordable housing has emerged as one of the most important issues of our day. And voters have looked at affordable housing, passing a housing trust fund in 2012, an affordable housing bond in 2015, a 25% inclusionary in 2016, a proposal for surplus properties, as well as development agreements for Pier 70 and the Giants. As we've talked to voters, one of the questions that comes back again and again is how do these decisions get made and how does affordable housing actually move forward and become implemented? What the measure before you will do is ensure a smoother and more transparent process for bringing affordable housing construction in front of people now. The measure will create a single point where discussions will happen about affordable housing, economic development, development agreements, and proposals for the disposition of surplus properties for the city. It creates greater transparency and is something that is greatly needed and will ensure that voters and the public understand how the city is delivering on its promises to meet at least a 33% affordable housing in this city from here on out. So again, I urge you to support this measure, put it before the voters in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Supervisors. My name is Malcolm Young. I'm with the Chinatown Community Development Center. First of all, I just want to support the comments that Fernando made. We agree with those, and we urge this board to put on the ballot the measure that includes the commission, because we're not sure which one is 3 and 4. Perhaps somebody can clear 4. Sorry, Supervisor Peskin said we're measure 4. But, I want to add something to this conversation. We in Chinatown have always understood that affordable housing, economic development, social services are all part of a broader package around comprehensive community development strategies. This commission is going to create the opportunity to have a public conversation about how these 3 pieces work together and work together in a cohesive way. If we did not have this kind of comprehensive conversation in Chinatown in the early 80s, we would not have been able to pass the Chinatown Master Plan. The Chinatown Master Plan was a conversation that understood that small businesses were dependent upon residents who shopped there and were within walking distances, and those residents were folks who were low income and who could not survive a rebuild of Chinatown as was being proposed by a number of interests, including downtown office developers. This fusion of conversation, this opportunity to have a public conversation about marrying these strategies is something that we're incredibly excited about. In the 39-year history of our organization, comprehensive community development, not just affordable housing, not just economic development, not just social services, has been key to our mission, and we really look forward to this commission. Thank you, Supervisors.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Supervisors. I'm John Darling, the Taco Group. As it happens, I'm now the elder battle-scarred veteran in the room tonight, which is ironic. But I have perspective. 20 years ago, Mo was a relatively small agency because nearly all the housing money in the city was handled by the redevelopment agency, and the projects and its funding and the RFPs and developer selections were all done by the commission through a public process. And 20 years ago, there really wasn't an OEWD. Didn't exist. The big deals in those days were cut by the redevelopment agency. Now, Mo handles hundreds of millions of dollars of city money, billions of dollars of development. OEWD negotiates all the mega real estate deals in the city. And all they do is done in the dark. It's all done in their offices privately. There is no commission. There is no accountability. There is no public hearings. Nothing happens until it gets to you, and by the time it gets to you, it's too late to unscramble the eggs that they have decided to cook and present. This is inherently wrong. Secret government is always wrong. It is obviously open to political patronage. It is obviously open to political favoritism. It is obviously open to political retaliation. I'm not casting aspersions on any of the current members or the current mayor, but these things do happen. My company faced political retaliation in 2000. We were recommended for a housing project at Plaza Hotel on 6th Street, and it was denied to us at the commission because we had gone head-to-head with the then-sitting mayor politically in the 2000 election. Now, it was done in public, and that points out the second problem. That commission was all appointed by the mayor. It was not split between competing checks and balances as this ballot measure would do. Secret government is always wrong. We should have done this decades ago. It is time to do our business in the open, to do it fairly, to be accountable for everything, everybody. Now.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide public comment at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Supervisor Peskin, I have a question. With this commission, aren't we just adding an additional layer of bureaucracy which would slow down housing development?
So, Madam President, I would like to answer that question, and I'd also like to address something that Supervisor Wiener said earlier with regard to the charter amendment having to do with the Municipal Transportation Agency. And I hark back a number of years ago, I believe it was 2002, when the Planning Commission, entirely in those days appointed by the mayor, serving at the mayor's pleasure, was absolutely out of touch with the city and county of San Francisco. Neighborhood after neighborhood, the affordable housing community, and we put a charter amendment on the ballot that gave the president the ability to appoint a minority of 3 to that commission. The mayor still appointed a majority of 4. All 7 of those were subject to confirmation by the legislative body in the same way that the United States Senate approves a nominee to the courts. I say that today we actually have much better deliberation at the Planning Commission than we had a decade and a half ago. Everyday people's trust in the process has gotten better. It's still got a long ways to go. I think what Mr. Elberling said is just right, and you, as somebody who is involved in the Redevelopment Commission, should know that that layer of bureaucracy has existed over many of these functions for many, many decades. And does it take a little extra time? Yes. Does it increase trust? Yes. Does it create a better product with more public input? Absolutely. Does it give people a venue to express their frustrations, their good ideas? Absolutely. This conversation that we've been having, which I know is not an easy conversation for the administration. I understand that it is seen as, quote unquote, taking power away. I actually think it is a set of policies that will make these processes better. And let me say that in the discussion that we've had with the various affected departments, a number of good things have come forward, and I appreciate Supervisor Tang trying to find, as we have all tried to find, another compromise path that will make everybody happy. But in those discussions, which are in item 83 in the other meeting that we're having simultaneously, the notions that have come forward from those departments, because finally somebody is scrutinizing, finally somebody is calling for oversight, have been, let's create a 5-year housing plan that is reviewed by a public body. Now, the problem with item 83, if I may address it as it is also before us, is that it really doesn't give any day-to-day oversight. It really does not give the public and the interested stakeholders a venue for real participation. I understand and I appreciate the fact that this body would convene twice a year and have a hearing, but with all respect to the Transportation Authority Commission, it will be an informational hearing. Everybody's eyes will glaze over. There will be no decision that this body makes, and ultimately will prove to be a lot of show and tell. And I think that item 4, which is a real commission, is actually going to improve the process and the outcomes. And I mean no disrespect to the head of the Mayor's Office of Housing, Olson Lee, who is a storied professional who I've worked with for over a decade and a half in his role at the Redevelopment Agency and then at Mo. The same for Mr. Rufo and Ken Rich at OEWD. But I actually think that both of these departments, who have overlapping jurisdictions in the realm of housing, will be improved with a balanced professional oversight body called a commission, and I hope that we will send item 4 to the ballot.
Thank you. Can I get some clarity of what would happen with public housing, what would happen with the successor agency housing developments? How is this going to work, and how is this going to impact the production of those, like rehabilitation of affordable housing and production of new affordable housing? How do the projects in the pipeline continue unobstructed.
Oh, I suspect that all of the projects that are worthy will be embraced by this new commission, will receive positive input by members of the public, and in the process will be made better. I mean, there will actually be a forum and a venue for people in that kind of housing to actually have a place to go rather than have to figure out how to, be politically connected to get into the mayor's office and to, work it out. There will actually be a place that real everyday people can go, like they went for year after year to the Redevelopment Agency Commission. OCII is now, by virtue of the changes in state law, really a backwater commission. This will not affect OCII and the successor agency at all. And as Mr. Elberling said, the action is really at Mo. That's where the action is today. And the action for DDAs and DAs is at OEWD.
So, let me give you an example, because there's been a lot of work that has been, of course, happening as it relates to housing. Things that I'm concerned would not be able to happen with a commission, and I actually am very concerned about the impacts, especially on public housing and rehabilitation of affordable housing units that are falling apart in my district. I know that we, for example, were able to work with the Mayor's Office of Housing and work with the Housing Authority to get them $2 million to rehabilitate former units that were empty, and we were able to work together to house formerly homeless families. Now 179 families are housed as a result of that. And we are, through the RAD program, which people were skeptical about, we are in the process of not doing exactly what I wanted. I wanted to make sure that we were able to tear down places and rebuild, of course, like the Pings, like Westside Courts, like some of our older public Holly Court, some of the oldest public housing in the city. We didn't have enough money, and the challenge right now, as we speak, especially in Pitts Plaza in my district, those units, I was almost in tears seeing the night and day of what those units used to look like, not just mice infested and roach infested, but rat infested. And we had, of course, there are layers associated with trying to get a project of this magnitude done for the city through public housing, but I'm not seeing the connection of how this particular commission is going to help us move the projects that I care about forward in a more timely manner, specifically a lot of the rehabilitation work. And I want to understand exactly how this is going to help, because I don't want people to continue to live in these conditions a day longer than they have to, and I don't want a department that's going to be an obstructionist department that's going to prevent us from getting to that point because of its layers of approvals and requirements, and someone reaching out to not only all the commissioners but reaching out to members of the board. And what happens with CEQA? What happens with all these different layers that already come into place that makes this a challenge? I just want to understand how this is going to work, and I'm not seeing the writing on the wall.
So, Madam President, I think with regard to your fundamental concern, as I understand it, that there is widespread, many years consensus between the legislative branch of government and the executive branch of government relative to our imperative, be it at North Beach Place or Valencia Gardens or Alice Griffith, to rebuild and bring into the dawn of the 21st century our public housing units. And we express that again as the Board of Supervisors working with the mayor relative to the funds that you just talked about that are going to help benefit projects in your district and Supervisor Cohen's district and the Pings in the district that I represent. I think there's widespread agreement on that. I don't think that a commission is going to undermine, particularly given that the appointing authorities are this board and this mayor, our universally held consensus around the need to address those issues. But there will be a place and a venue for people to have input. I go back to, for instance, the controversy, and granted, this was before the rental assistance demonstration program. There was no RAD program in those days. It was the Housing Authority, which was not exactly, well, it wasn't really the city and county of San Francisco. But I remember the hundreds of residents at the North Beach projects who had no place to go where they were heard as they voiced their concerns about how that project was going to work. And as a matter of fact, it ended up becoming their district supervisor who had to intervene. There was no place for them really to go and be heard.
So not the Housing Authority meetings?
Well, those were some tough days, if you'll recall those days. And I don't want to get down into those details of how that entity and that Housing Authority Commission wasn't listening to much of anybody. But if we can make a commitment to create a real, transparent, open commission, I think all of the concerns that you're expressing will ultimately become part of the fabric of that institution in the same way that has happened at this MTA commission that was a big thought in 1999, but now has powers to legislate all of the things that they legislate in the public transportation realm. Let's give this a shot and see if it works. I don't think it's going to slow projects down. I think it's going to make projects better.
Okay, I have a lot more questions, and I will give my colleagues an opportunity to make their comments and ask questions. Thank you for your patience. Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you, President Breed. I would actually just like, especially in light of this conversation, I know we have a number of staff and department heads who are here, I think, that are moderately involved in this issue. I know I see Olson Lee from OCD and Todd Rufo from OEWD. I'd just love to come out, if you guys could come up and give your opinion here about either the commentary that you just heard or as well your overall opinion about this initiative.
Thank you, Supervisor. Todd Rufo, Director of the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. I strongly believe, and I shared this in the Rules Committee at the number of hearings, in increased community engagement, public review, additional oversight. But I have serious concerns about the proposed commission and the impact it would have on our ability to achieve our ultimate mission, to help people, connect people to good jobs, to help keep jobs in San Francisco, to support our small businesses. In particular, OEWD is a grant-making organization. We provide $23 million in general fund-funded grants, and we are very concerned about the delays that this commission process would have on our grant-making ability, and that's 3 months is what we anticipate the impact to be. And these are grants that go to CBOs that provide workforce services as well as small business assistance. We are also very concerned about the potential conflicts that a commission as an oversight body would have on workforce development. As you know, half of our department is focused on training and connecting residents to good jobs through our Workforce Development Division. The work of our Workforce Development Division is governed through the Workforce Investment Act, and we have a federally mandated body which Supervisor Cohen sits on, which is appointed by the mayor, is prescribed by federal law, and has by federal law is required to oversee our workforce programming. It's not clear how a conflict between policy direction that's given by the commission, the proposed commission, if there's a conflict with which way the WSIF direction would be, it's unclear how that conflict would be resolved. Finally, I just want to touch on a point around the oversight today. I am proud of the amount of oversight and engagement that OEWD engages in today. Is there more that we could do? Of course, and we welcome that, and we have engaged in conversations with the supervisors' offices about how we can do that, and that's related to, I think, item 82. But I just want to point out that today, in the last fiscal year alone, we've done 56 commission meetings, and those include commission meetings at Planning, PUC, MTA, Rec Park, OCI, and others. We've done nearly 100 advisory board or task force meetings, and we've done more than 500 community meetings that we've either convened or attended. Again, we are firm believers in community engagement and welcome additional opportunities to do that. And I think that's why the amendments that, in working with supervisors' offices, have put forward specifically related to the 6-month work plan hearings as well as the 5-year strategic planning hearings, we think that's an appropriate discussion to have here at the board. I think if today's discussion has highlighted anything, it's the importance of having these discussions at the board and with the board, and we would look forward to those opportunities to update you on our work, brief you on our strategic plan, and take the guidance and feedback that you have on it. And I think think our amendments, as again in the ID82 item, it increases, it achieves the author's intent of increasing transparency and oversight while allowing the department to still remain nimble and be able to serve our clients and customers in an effective and expeditious way.
Supervisor Farrell?
Thank you, Mr. Rufo and Mr. Lee.
I have the unique sort of position.
Can you introduce yourself?
Excuse me. Olson Lee, Director of the Mayor's Office of Housing. I have the unique position of being the Director of the Mayor's Office of Housing and formerly the Deputy Director for the Redevelopment Agency working with the Commission. And I can tell you, just standing here, that having a commission for the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development and the Office of Economic and Workforce Development will not expedite the work that we do. It will make it more transparent because we will have yet another body to go before we also will have to still go before the board. So one of the major differences between the Redevelopment Agency Commission and the commission being proposed, it was that it was a separate state agency, and it had many of the powers that the board has and is not delegating to this new commission. So it just creates yet an additional body for which we would have to go through before we would actually get to the Board of Supervisors to issue our bonds, to do our purchase and sale agreements, to do other things that are reserved for the board per se. One of the things that the controller spoke about in terms of the question of the commission is the minimal cost of a commission, of a mere $160,000 in terms of a commission secretariat and staff time. One of the things I really wanted to say was the question of it's the opportunity cost of staff time and the amount of time that would take to prepare commission memos, to attend and staff commission meetings, and to provide that level of staffing necessary for a particular commission. And, again, at this point, I think the public speakers are correct. This is the busiest time ever in the history of the Mayor's Office of Housing. We're trying to churn out thousands of units, and we're doing amazing things in terms of the rental assistance demonstration program. And by the way, not only do those projects all come to the Board of Supervisors at least 3 times, they've also gone through a subcommittee of the Public Housing Commission as well as the full commission. There is a level of oversight, and the measure that the administration has proposed provides what is potentially missing in terms of the overall strategic planning of the 5-year plan and the annual plan. But I do want to mention that we do provide a consolidated plan to the Board of Supervisors, which is our annual expenditures of not only community development block grant funds, but also other city funds on an annual basis. But so to the extent that there is a need for greater oversight, the measure sponsored by the administrations provides that level of oversight. But I think that our biggest concern is the ability to do the job that the residents of the city of San Francisco and you, the Board of Supervisors, expect of us. No one has ever told us to do affordable housing slower. This measure, this commission, will undoubtedly slow the process down. Yes, there will be more transparency, but it will indeed slow the process down. The other thing that I would like to mention about this process, we have 160 community development block grants. That, in addition to the work of OEWD in terms of their various grants, is a huge workload. And this would really fall upon this commission to be able to handle that type of workload in a very, very short period of time so we could meet the annual funding cycle for all these nonprofits who are perhaps not solely dependent on our CDBG block grants or the OEWD grants per se. But there would be sort of a collision of funding before this particular body. So the bottom line is it will not speed up the process. We feel strongly that the board oversight is where the oversight should be, and we are happy to provide materials to the board and to answer any board requests as it relates to a particular project or a particular NOFA. That would allow us to try to complete the work that we're trying to do on the RAD program. We hope to close in September on 2,000 units of public housing. That may or may not have happened with a commission. And the question of getting those 15 projects through the commission process again, and then also to the board, just adds an additional step that is duplicative of the work that this board does and the work of the Public Housing Commission.
Thank you. Supervisor Farrell?
Good.
Okay. Supervisor Tang?
Thank you. Through the chair to the sponsor of the commission measure, something I neglected to ask in Rules Committee, but given that certain departments such as MOHCD have to go through various commissions for certain approvals and including the Board of Supervisors, how I'm trying to understand the mechanics of how your proposal will work. So for example, is it one additional stop that they have to make? And then also, what if there's conflicting kind of decision or direction that, say, this Housing and Development Commission makes versus, say, a Planning Commission? How do you envision that working?
Supervisor Peskin?
Thank you. Through the President to Supervisor Tank. First of all, the Planning Commission's role is really a role of making sure, is an entitlement role. I see this as really a clearinghouse for policy priority setting. As President Breed raised, she said, she had a different vision for tearing down some, I forget which project.
West Side Courts.
West Side Courts. And there was right now, all of those things happen behind closed doors. There is no place where the public and interested parties and stakeholders get to see that decision being made. This commission could figure out ways to streamline things. We've actually have provisions in there for NOFAs. This is in no way intended, and I believe when it becomes regularized, in no way will it slow things down. I understand, and I think Mr. Lee is very clear. Will this give more transparency? Yes. Is it going to be a pain in his butt? Well, yes, that's true too. But I think it's worth it.
So again, just to clarify, it's more of a policy direction versus actual decisions on.
We don't have any body where the policies of, are we going to build 100% supportive housing? Are we going to build senior housing? In what amounts? That is not discussed really in front of any policy body. Let us have a housing commission that is the clearinghouse for those policy conversations.
And I'm glad you spoke to that because actually, unfortunately, we have not come to an agreement on the direction we want to go here. I actually do agree with you that we need a little bit more of a high-level policy discussion as to kind of where MOHCD should be going. Perhaps even OAWD as well. And I think that we could do that at the Board of Supervisors. And in fact, we could do it quicker. We could even adopt an ordinance right now that would require both departments to do certain things before us at the full board. In terms of MOHCD, so much of their work actually comes before us at the full Board of Supervisors. I think the vast majority of all of their decisions have to come before us. And so, as I've said in Rules Committee, certainly I wish that maybe we would pay more attention when they come before us or ask more questions, but we do have that opportunity when those items come up for a decision by us, most of which also hit committee level as well. In terms of better transparency and so forth, I support that. And that's why I suggested to Supervisor Peskin certain things that we could do here at the Board of Supervisors, again, immediately. While I don't support delaying things, I also don't see it as a huge deal if it means that, yes, we have a collective vision together that we can discuss fully in front of the public. But unfortunately, I know that this particular commission and the issues around it go beyond myself here today. It's a lot of other issues that are involved. But the fact that we're also creating a commission that subsumes two departments, not just one, but two, I think is very problematic. I think that, yes, there needs to be a more holistic, comprehensive conversation around economic development and how it intersects with housing. But here we are creating a commission that, again, oversees OEWD and MOHCD. So I just have real problems with this. I wish that we had been able to come to an agreement on things that we could achieve in the short term. I would like to actually continue, I think it's item 83, if possible. I still want to keep that conversation live today. So I think that's all I have to say, since Supervisor Peskin and I have had many conversations. I'm glad I've been able to kind of understand, I think, what you're trying to get at. I just wish we could do it in a more collaborative way here.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Peskin's comments at the beginning in many ways are very attractive, talking about the experience of the Planning Commission. Could also talk about the Police Commission, another situation where the commission that was wholly controlled by the mayor was split with 4 mayoral appointments, 3 supervisorial appointments. And there are a lot of positives for both of those transitions. And if this were simply someone coming in and saying, I want to create an affordable housing commission, it's an oversight commission for MOHCD, I would be, along those lines, I would be hard-pressed to say no to that proposal. But that is not my understanding of what is being approved, or what's being proposed here. What's being proposed here goes well beyond simply creating, say, an affordable housing commission. Supervisor Peskin will correct me if I misread anything, but as I understand it, this commission is not the sort of typical split appointments that we normally see: 4 appointed by the mayor, subject to board approval, 3 appointed by either by the board or by the board president. Instead, it's 3 appointed by the mayor, 3 appointed by the board, 1 appointed by the controller. So the mayor appoints a minority of the commissioners. In addition, as I understand it, the 2 department heads for the successor to OEWD and to MOHCD would be appointed by the commission with no involvement by the mayor. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I think with planning, head of director of planning, the police chief, the commissions present multiple options to the mayor, and the mayor either picks one or can reject all of them. The way I read this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this commission simply hires or appoints the 2 department heads, and the mayor has no participation. So that is very different than how we do things with the planning department or the police department. In addition, for reasons I don't understand, if this is supposed to be about really about affordable housing, OEWD is swept into this as well. And so Supervisor Peskin is not he's not jumping up and down to correct the way I've characterized it, so I think I've characterized it correctly. So this measure goes absolutely dramatically beyond the measure that the voters adopted to restructure the Planning Commission or the Police Commission, for that matter. This is absolutely taking 2 departments that are very much part of the executive branch and taking them away from the executive branch, so that they now are actually not really, neither department is truly accountable to any elected official, the mayor or otherwise. It's one of these splintered departments. And for something that's critically important as affordable housing and economic development, why would we do that? There is a way to create a split commission, and it's happened before, that's done in a way where we still recognize that the mayor is the elected chief executive of the city. You can campaign for whoever you want, but we do have an executive branch, and this absolutely withdraws departments from the executive branch. And so I when I talked earlier about these four charter amendments in combination, it really is an absolute assault on the institutional integrity of the office of the mayor, period, for this mayor and all future mayors. And this measure is actually, I think, of the four, is, I think, the largest in terms of what it takes away from the executive branch. So again, if Supervisor Peskin wants to propose what he actually described at the beginning, something along the lines of the Planning Commission, I'm open to that discussion, but that is absolutely not what's being proposed here, and I just won't support it.
Thank you, Supervisor Wiener. And Supervisor Peskin, for clarity, or if you can clarify why the controller's appointment is not subjected to Board of Supervisor approval, but the mayor's appointment is. Can you clarify your thinking on that?
The notion was to have a truly independent commission that was not controlled by the legislative or executive branches, but that the seventh position be vested in a independent body or an independent position in the form of the controller, who I think is universally respected on all sides of City Hall, and that was the thinking behind that.
Thank you. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I just want to express my support for this measure and talk about why I think it's important. A couple of things that I should add. I think that we really need a consistent standard about which departments have commissions and which don't. And it's not clear to me why the Mayor's Office of Housing doesn't have a commission and the Planning Commission does, and why the Rec and Park Department has a commission and the Mayor's Office of Economic and Workforce Development does not. And so as we talk about adding a citizen overlay to these really important departments, I think that the one thing that we do know is that housing and affordable housing is clearly a very important issue in the city, and one that our constituents and voters are very engaged on and would like greater input over. I've heard over and over again from many residents that they'd like to see a citizen oversight body for these two very important departments. And to speak actually of the development side, it is true that ultimately development agreements negotiated through the Mayor's Office of Economic Development, Board of Supervisors office, sometimes even the Planning Department, does come to the full board for approval. But sometimes at the end of the game, there's just a lot of public input that hasn't been incorporated. And having worked on many development deals on the Board of Supervisors end and seeing a lot of development here in the city, I believe that actually more process produces a greater project at the end of the day. And sometimes I'm often trying to incorporate a lot of public input really late in the game because there wasn't earlier points in time when the community could have provided that input. And we're doing a lot of last-minute negotiations as we come before the Board of Supervisors. And I actually think that this is going to provide a better process for all of us. I don't see a time when more transparency and accountability doesn't produce a greater result. I think that we can work within existing timelines, that we can place these commission meetings to take place so that there aren't delays before these projects come before us. And finally, I think to Supervisor Peskin's point, we don't really have a good vehicle through which the public can talk about the types of affordable housing that they'd like to see the city produce. We have a vast sum of money that we have dedicated and set aside to build and construct affordable housing or to acquire and rehabilitate existing housing. All of this is incredibly important. I know our residents would like a say in terms of the types of housing and the varying levels of income that they'd like to see the city prioritize. We have family housing, we have senior housing, we have a whole variety of income, low income, middle income housing, and I think having a citizens commission will only actually enhance the decisions that we're able to make and provide the Board of Supervisors and the Mayor's Office greater input in terms of what the city would like to see. I would like to see this move forward. I think it's wholly consistent with what we have in other city departments that are considered of import here in the city. I think that actually really the only two things that we really distinguish is which departments have commissions that are entirely appointed by the mayor, and which have split appointments. I think there's no question that these departments should have a commission. Every other department has a commission. DCYF did not have a commission. We finally put that into place with our children, our council. So these two departments should absolutely have a commission. I think the question is whether we think that these departments are worthy of a split appointment commission. I think because of the issue areas that they oversee, which is housing, of tremendous importance to our citizen body, very similar to MTA, which I believe should have a split appointment as well, that these commissions should be split. But I think the question of whether these departments need a commission or not, I think that's a moot point. Every other department has one. So let's make this consistent. But if we really want to talk about expediting the process and removing bureaucracy, then let's talk about all the departments and which departments truly deserve a citizen commission and which don't. Because unless that's on the table, then I think the only question here before us today is whether this is a split body appointment or not. And I think because of the issues that these two departments oversee, I think that these two bodies deserve a split appointment.
Colleagues, I'm starting to lose it. I am hungry, and I know we have other business to continue with. So do we want to take a recess, or?
No.
I need a recess.
No.
No? Well, somebody needs to take my place up here. No one ever wants to switch out with me. I need a minute. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. I think Supervisor Weiner is going to take you up on that.
Don't move either, because y'all be trying to run away.
I'll be very brief, and let me simply say that I don't want to make generalizations about either one of these two departments. I mean, there are very good people who work in each one of them. I see some of them here. And I do think that qualitatively there has been a difference in terms of my experience between the Mayor's Office of Housing and the Mayor's Office of Workforce and Economic Development. I do want to commend MOEWD for on a number of issues. I think you have gone out of your way to be responsive, and I'm very appreciative of that. But I think that even with respect to MOEWD, if you look at what happened with the legacy business legislation and the ballot measure, where the voters, we passed that legislation over a year ago, the voters acted on it months ago, and then yet very little happened during that period of time. In fact, nothing happened until recently. I think that MOEWD itself could have benefited from that. With respect to the Mayor's Office of Housing, I simply have to say that I was listening to the presentation from that department, and I felt like I was living in a surreal world, in a different reality, because the discussion of what the Mayor's Office of Housing has done and how it has performed, it is the complete opposite of my experience, not only as a supervisor, member of this body, but as a supervisor for District 9, which includes the mission, which has been ground zero for displacement. The Mayor's Office of Housing, with all due respect, in terms of the housing crisis, has been the least responsive department that I have seen in my history, not only as a member of the Board of Supervisors, but also as a government lawyer before that. At least other departments actually try to address your concerns and try to even make it look like they care about what concerns you have raised. And we have raised issue over the years about the Mayor's Office of Housing, and there hasn't been a response from the Mayor's Office of Housing. Some of us actually even raised that issue prior to approving the $310 million bond, and there was no response. And we went ahead and still supported the bond because it was the right thing to do. So at the end of the day, it's unfortunate that we're here, but it really is because of the Mayor's Office of Housing and how it has operated over the years that we find ourselves having to be here. And the idea that the Mayor's Office of Housing will work more quickly without a commission is just laughable. I mean, it's laughable that an agency that hasn't really demonstrated any ability to actually get any kind of affordable housing built is coming here and say, don't slow us down. Don't slow you down. What have you been up to all these years? I mean, I look forward to having this discussion because the facts are the complete opposite of what has been presented. I actually think that this is a long time coming, and I appreciate the concern that some of my colleagues have in not slowing anything down, which is why I think this is needed, because I don't see how it is possible for anything to be slower than it's been for the last few years. Thank you.
Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. Question through the chair to Supervisor Peskin. So I think we all know where this conversation is going to go, where everything is going to be with the two items. My question to you then is, would you consider at least separating out the commission so that one is for MOHCD and one is for OEWD?
So, through the chair to Supervisor Tang, this is not just my work product. This is really the evolution of hearing from many, many different individuals and organizations that work closely with MOHCD and OEWD. So I am a vehicle for expressing that. This is something that this is not the first time that this conversation has come up in these chambers relative to creating an oversight body over one or both of these agencies. But I think that what is before you is been vetted with many of the stakeholders, and I think that this is what they want and the public deserves.
Thank you. I'm just responding, really to some of the comments that Supervisor Kim made earlier. Again, all those different departments actually have their own commission for their own departments. And some functions of OEWD may overlap with MOHCD, such as, perhaps development agreements and so forth. But I think that fundamentally the two departments actually have very different functions. And so for the vast majority of their work. And so I would... If we know what's going to happen, I would much prefer that it be a separate commission for both of them, for each of the departments.
Supervisor Yee.
This has been really a good discussion. It's something that I haven't focused on. I think my focus was more on, the 50 other ballot initiatives. In regards to a lot of it was the revenue issue, and there's some straightforward ones. I think the MTA one that I put on there was pretty straightforward to duplicate some of the stuff that we've been doing anyways. I'm in support of having a commission of some sort. Certainly, there's been some issues raised by several people here that makes me feel like I need to study this even closer. I'm actually inclined to continue both of these items if somebody wants to make that motion. So it gives me an opportunity to really get my hands around all of this.
So you're making a motion to continue?
To continue items 4 and 83 to the meeting of July 26th.
Is that your motion, Supervisor Yee?
I think Supervisor Tang made the motion.
Or I suggested it.
And that I was...
Okay, well, you can make it, and I will second. Supervisor Tang will second it. Is that okay?
Supervisor Tang will make the motion, and what I said is that I would be like to see both items continue.
Okay, Supervisor Tang has made the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Wiener. Colleagues, you still want to talk?
I have a question.
Okay. Supervisor Wiener.
Can I through the president
yes.
to Supervisor Peskin, can Supervisor Peskin, through chair, just at least acknowledge that the commission that's being created here is very different than what was created with the Planning Commission or the Police Commission, in that the mayor does not make a majority of the appointments, that that the mayor does not have any say whatsoever in the hiring of these department heads. And so I understand, when Supervisor Kim talks about they should have a commissions here, I think we probably all thought at one point, well, should there be an affordable housing commission, for example, over MOHCD? I think probably every single one of us at one point or another has considered that. And as I said at the beginning, it's a reasonable thing to consider. But I feel like this is being pitched as we're just creating like another planning commission situation, when that is absolutely not what it is. And am I wrong about that? Can you acknowledge that?
Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. Through the President to Supervisor Wiener. First of all, let me acknowledge that everything that is set forth in this charter amendment is what it is. There are many different commission structures. The Ethics Commission, for instance, can hire or fire its executive director. There are many, many different models. Let me say this. The mayor would have 3 appointees on this body, and those 3 appointees would be involved in the selection process. Those 3 appointees would be part of the process of removal of a department head. So the mayor would have influence in that. I mean no disrespect to our board liaison, but we all read in the paper that she was texting a mayor appointee on the Planning Commission about ways to vote, because those texts were out there, and we all know that. So, yes, the mayor would have influence. So, no, I would not acknowledge that.
So you would not? Well, that's interesting, because, again, you through the chair, Supervisor Peskin, you started this whole debate by saying this worked out so great with the Planning Commission, where the mayor got 4 subject to board approval, the board president got 3 subject to board approval, and it's just changed everything. It's been great, and I'm a supporter of the Planning Commission and of that model. But the Planning Commission is 4 mayoral appointees. Mayor appoints a majority, and the Planning Commission, as I understand it, submits 3 names of potential planning directors to the mayor. The mayor either picks one or rejects all 3. That is not what's being done here. The mayor no longer has a majority of the commissioners, and the mayor has no say whatsoever in the hiring of the mayor. So the mayor of San Francisco, post Ed Lee, will have no say whatsoever in terms of any kind of control, because there's a minority of the commissioners appointed by the mayor in the hiring of the person who oversees affordable housing in San Francisco, the person who oversees economic development, including negotiation of some of the most significant development agreements in San Francisco impacting our city. And we're saying that the mayor is not going to have any kind of actual control over who those department heads are, when the mayor has been elected as the chief executive of the city. Support him or don't support him. And again, I'm not criticizing you, through the chair, Supervisor Peskin, for proposing this, but I think we need to at least be very open that this is not in any sense replicating the model of the Planning Commission or the Police Commission. This is a very, very new structure, and when I said before that this is about dismantling the executive authority of the office of the mayor, this is really what I'm talking about. That's what this does.
Madam President, may I respond?
Supervisor Peskin.
Through the President to Supervisor Wiener. First of all, the reason I'm having trouble acknowledging what you're saying is because the mayor would appoint 3 members. The mayor is also the appointing authority of the controller. So I think the mayor would have actually a remarkable amount of influence in who was ultimately selected to be the director of this department. So that's why I'm having trouble acknowledging that. But I also think that we need to kind of move into the real world. And the real world is, in attempting to negotiate this with members of the executive branch, they're not interested in having this commission at all. So I have attempted in good faith to try to find a place that I could minimize or eliminate opposition from the executive branch. They're not interested in having this commission at all. As a matter of fact, they are not interested even in having a citizens advisory committee that by the way, was not something I thought was good public policy relative to what this department needs, but that was rejected out of hand. So I'm delighted through the president that, Supervisor Wiener, you're saying you might vote for this if the mayor appointed 4 and the board appointed 3, and the mayor could, as is the case in the planning department, select from 3 that are forwarded to the mayor. But the mayor's office is not interested in that compromise.
Through the chair, the mayor's office doesn't get a vote on whether a charter amendment goes on the ballot. We do.
Well, that's why that's not before us, because they didn't want to negotiate.
Thank you. Supervisor Campos.
I know that it's getting late, so I'll simply note that where I do think it's important to acknowledge that there is a difference of opinion in terms of how well or not so well things are functioning. And in that sense, I think it is a different vision. I think that if you are happy with the status quo, then you would be against this proposal, just like you would be against some of the other proposals that have been put forward. And in that sense, there are those of us who have a different vision and are trying to present that vision to the voters. And at the end of the day, you know, we can debate all we want about which vision is the right vision, but that's not our call to make. That should be up to the voters to decide. And I think that in the end, voters will decide that the status quo is not working and that they want change. And that's what we're proposing.
Thank you. Seeing no names on the roster, there's a motion to continue item 83 and item 4 of the special meeting to the meeting of July 26, 2016. It was moved and seconded, and we will take that, colleagues. Madam Clerk, can we take it without objection, or should we do a... Thank you. Roll call.
Thank you,
on the continuance.
Supervisor Farrell? Aye. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim?
Aye.
Could you restate?
Continuance, yes.
Supervisor Kim?
Aye.
You want clarity? Okay.
I just got clarity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin?
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos?
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen? Cohen, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Okay, the motion to continue to the meeting of July 26, 2016 passes.
And that's for item 83 and item 4, Madam President.
Yes, so they'll be on the meeting, the agenda meeting on the 26th. All right, Madam Clerk, I'd like to make a motion to rescind the vote on item number 37.
Wait, which one's 37? Which one's 37?
Police accountability.
Great.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Tang. Madam Clerk, can we take this without objection?
Yes, Madam President.
Without objection, the motion to rescind passes. And then I'd like to make a motion to continue this item to the meeting of July 26, 2016. Is there a second?
Second.
July 26, 2016, seconded by Supervisor Tang. Colleagues, you want a roll call vote to continue?
We already dealt with this item.
Well, I rescinded the vote and wanted to continue it to the meeting of July 26, 2016.
I think we'll end up having the same result.
Okay, but can we continue the item to the meeting of July 26, 2016?
I'll have a roll call vote on that.
Roll call vote, please.
On the continuance, Supervisor Farrell?
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
No.
Marr, no. Supervisor Peskin?
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
No.
Avalos, no. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos?
No.
Campos, no. Supervisor Cohen? Cohen, aye. There are 8 ayes and 3 noes with Supervisors Marr, Avalos, and Campos in the dissent.
Okay, item number 37 will be continued to the meeting of July 26, 2016. Madam Clerk.
General public comment, Madam President.
General public comment for the special meeting. Are there any members of the public who, come on, you want to come speak? Okay. You're tired? I got you. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak on public comment for the special board meeting? Please come forward. Not so fast, colleagues. Take your time, Mr. Gilberte.
I want to go home too. What time is the meeting?
Next Tuesday at 2 o'clock.
This is for the special meeting, if you want to make public comment for the special meeting.
No, I just want to know what time the meeting was.
Next Tuesday.
Okay.
Next Tuesday, not Friday. Thank you.
Yes. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide public comment at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Madam Clerk, can you please read the in memoriams?
Today's meeting will be adjourned in memory of the following beloved individuals. On behalf of President Breed, for the late Mr. Josh Williams, at the suggestion of President Breed, Supervisor Cohen, Yee, Kim, and Marr, and on behalf of the entire Board of Supervisors, for the late Principal from Galileo, Marcus Blacksher.
Okay, Madam Clerk, is there any other business before us today?
That concludes our business for today.
We are adjourned for our regular board meeting and our special board meeting.